Kelthar's four eyes blinked in sequence. As he watched the human delegation enter the Grand Assembly Hall, his chitinous fingers tapped against his data tablet, recording observations as he had done for 3 centuries. The humans walked with an unusual gait, their 2 legs carrying them forward with what seemed like barely controlled falling. They were so small compared to the Kralathi, so soft compared to his own Velusian people, so young compared to everyone. The assembly hall stretched vast and ancient above them, its crystal dome filtering the light of 14 suns from 14 homeworlds. Kelthar had seen 200 species petition for membership in his lifetime. Most failed, a few succeeded. None had interested him less than these humans. The species known as humanity requests full membership in the Galactic Council, announced. Speaker Vertam, his translation device rendering his words in 5,000 languages simultaneously. They have completed the probationary period of 50 standard cycles. They bring their credentials for review. The human ambassador stepped forward. Her name was Chun, and her file said she was 62 Earth years old, though she looked young by Velusian standards. She wore a simple blue uniform with strange symbols on the shoulders. When she spoke, her voice was steady but carried an undertone of something Kelthar couldn't quite identify. Nervousness? Excitement? These emotional creatures were difficult to read. Honored members of the Council, Ambassador Chun began, humanity comes before you in humility and hope. We are young, we know this. We have been traveling between stars for only 400 of our years. We have made mistakes in our expansion, and we have learned from them. We offer our knowledge, our culture, our friendship to this great assembly of civilizations. Kelthar watched the council members respond. The Zenthari, graceful and floating in their specialized atmosphere tanks, barely moved. The Kralathi representatives, massive reptilian beings who had conquered 40 worlds before joining the council 3,000 years ago, looked amused. The other Velusians in attendance seemed to share Kelthar's mild boredom. Another species, another petition. Another 1,000 years of watching them grow and probably stagnate like all the others. The presentations began. Humans showed their technology, adequate fusion drives, decent quantum computers, acceptable medical science. They showed their art, strange sounds they called music, visual representations that seemed to value emotion over precision, written words that told stories instead of recording facts. They showed their governmental structure, a complicated federation of nation-states that had only unified 300 years before when they reached their moon. They still have nations, whispered Kelthar's colleague Dalmor. Actual separate governments within their species. How primitive. Kelthar nodded slowly. The Velusians had unified 40,000 years ago. The concept of separate human governments seemed almost childish. But then came the military presentation, and Kelthar's attention sharpened. The human military officer, a man named Admiral Zhao, displayed their fleet capabilities. Carrier groups, battle cruisers, destroyers, frigates, support vessels. The number seemed excessive for a species that claimed to seek peace. The Velusians had ceremonial defense ships, maintained mostly for asteroid deflection and rescue operations. The humans had an actual navy. Why? Asked Council Member Treshka, a Zenthari elder. Does a species seeking peaceful integration maintain such extensive military forces? Admiral Zhao smiled, and Kelthar noticed his teeth. Flat in front, sharp on the sides, omnivore teeth. Predator teeth. Honored member, humanity believes in peace. We also believe in being prepared. Our history has taught us that hope for the best requires preparation for the worst. The Council. Chambers filled with the various sounds of alien laughter and amusement. Kelthar didn't laugh. He made a note in his tablet. Unusual military emphasis for diplomatic mission, investigate further. The vote came, as votes always did. The humans were granted provisional membership with full membership to be reviewed in 50 more cycles. They would have limited voting rights, access to trade networks, and permission to establish colonies in designated zones. They seemed pleased with this, their faces making that strange expression where the corners of their mouths turned upward. After the ceremony, Kelthar approached Ambassador Chun. His role as the Council's officials and archaeologist and cultural liaison meant he would be responsible for documenting this new species, understanding their development, and reporting on their integration. Ambassador Chun, he said through his translator, I am Kelthar of Illusion. I will be your species' primary liaison and documentarian. I hope we can work together productively. The human extended her hand, and Kelthar had studied enough to know this was a greeting gesture. He carefully wrapped one of his chitinous fingers around her soft, warm appendage and moved it up and down as their customs required. It's an honor, Kelthar, Chun said, and her eyes, only two of them, focused directly on his face. Humans did that, he had read. Direct eye contact, slightly unsettling. I look forward to sharing humanity's story with you. Over the following weeks, Kelthar began his documentation. He interviewed human diplomats, scientists, artists, and civilians. He visited their embassy, a modest building that somehow felt both formal and comfortable. He tasted their food, which was aggressively flavored compared to Volusian nutrition paste. He listened to their music, which seemed designed to provoke emotional responses rather than provide pleasant background sound, but it was a conversation with Admiral Zhao that stuck in his mind. They sat in the Admiral's office, surrounded by strange decorations. Kelthar recognized images of old human military vessels, ocean-going ships from their pre-space era. There were also symbols and flags, each apparently meaning something to the Admiral. Tell me about Earth's unification, Kelthar asked, his tablet ready to record. Most species unify early in their development. Humanity seems to have unified quite late. Why? Zhao leaned back in his chair, his face taking on a thoughtful expression. We're stubborn, I suppose. For most of our history, we were divided into hundreds of nations, thousands of cultures, dozens of religions and philosophies. We fought each other constantly. Wars over territory, resources, ideas, beliefs. It wasn't until we nearly destroyed ourselves that we finally came together. Nearly destroyed yourselves? Kelthar's antenna twitched with interest. How? Nuclear weapons, Zhao said simply. We developed the ability to split atoms and release enormous energy. We built bombs that could level cities. At our peak, we had enough weapons to make our entire planet uninhabitable. For about a century, we lived under the threat of total extinction. Kelthar stopped recording. You created weapons that could end your own species? Yes, and you didn't use them? Zhao smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. We came close? Several times, but we learned restraint. We learned negotiation. We learned that survival required cooperation. The threat of mutual destruction taught us to talk instead of fight. But you still maintain significant military forces, Kelthar observed. Because we remember what happens when you're not prepared, Zhao replied. We spent 10,000 years fighting each other, Kelthar. We learned every possible way to wage war. And then we learned the most important lesson. Sometimes the best way to avoid war is to be very, very good at it. Kelthar left that meeting with an uneasy feeling in his three-chambered stomach. He filed his initial report to the Council. Humanity appears suitable for membership. Culturally diverse, technologically adequate, diplomatically engaged. Note: unusual emphasis on military preparedness may indicate deep-seated cultural trauma. Recommend monitoring, but no restrictions. As he submitted the report, he looked out at the stars visible from his quarters on the council station. Humans were out there now, spreading through their designated zones, building colonies, establishing trade. They seemed harmless enough, eager, even naive in their optimism. Still, Admiral Zhao's words echoed in his mind. Sometimes the best way to avoid war is to be very, very good at it. What kind of species learns to be good at war? Kelthar wondered. And what did it mean that they chose peace anyway? He didn't know then that within 2 years he would have his answer. The border disputes began quietly, as these things usually did. Kelthar barely noticed them at first, buried as he was in his documentation of human cultural practices. He was particularly fascinated by their concept of fiction stories they created knowing they were false, yet valued deeply. It seemed wasteful, but humans insisted these lies taught truth. Then the reports from the frontier began arriving with increasing frequency. The Kralathi Empire, which had been a council member for 3 millennia, was expanding into disputed zones. Small colonies were being pressured to accept Kralathi governance. Trade ships were being inspected and sometimes detained. Border markers were being moved. Kelthar attended the emergency council session with mild interest. These disputes happened every few centuries. The council would protest, the Kralathi would make excuses, eventually some compromise would be reached. This was how civilized species handled disagreement, but High Commander Draxler of the Kralathi stood before the council with his massive frame radiating contempt rather than contrition. His scales gleamed like polished stone, and his teeth actual predator teeth, not the omnivore compromise that humans had showed as he spoke. "The council has grown soft," Draxler announced. "You hide behind laws and words while the galaxy fills with lesser species. The territories we claim were empty. We have filled them with purpose and strength. If you disagree, enforce your objections." Speaker Vertown's tendrils quivered with distress. "High Commander, we have treaties. We have agreements that span thousands of years. The Council does not enforce through violence. We enforce through consensus and weakness," Draxler interrupted. "You enforce through weakness. The Kralathi Empire will expand as it sees fit. We have given the Council notice as courtesy, nothing more." He left the chamber. The silence that followed felt heavy with something Kelthar hadn't experienced in his 3 centuries of life. It took him a moment to identify it. Fear. The council debates went on for weeks. The Volusians advocated for economic sanctions. The Zenthari suggested diplomatic isolation. The Mrath proposed forming a committee to study the situation. No one suggested military response because no one had a military worth discussing. Ceremonial defense forces couldn't fight an empire that had conquered 40 worlds before joining the council. It was Ambassador Chun who finally stood and made the offer that changed everything. "The United Earth Federation formally offers military assistance to the council," she said quietly. "Our fleet is at your disposal for defensive operations." The council chamber erupted in dozens of languages. Kelthar heard his fellow Volusians chittering with amused disbelief. The humans? The species barely 4 centuries into space travel? Offering to defend against the Kralathi? "Ambassador," Speaker Vortum said gently, "we appreciate the gesture, but humanity's forces are limited compared to what would be required." "Speaker, with respect, you don't know what we have." Chun's voice remained calm. "And more importantly, you don't know how we use it." The council ultimately voted to decline the human offer. Kelthar watched Ambassador Chun's face carefully as the vote was announced. She showed no anger, just a slight tightening around her eyes. She nodded once and sat down. That night, Kelthar visited the human embassy. He found Chun in her office, reviewing reports on a holographic display. She looked tired. "Ambassador, may I ask you something directly?" Kelthar settled his body into the chair designed for his species. "Of course. Why did you offer to fight for the council? Your species gains nothing from this conflict. You could simply fortify your own territories and wait for the situation to resolve." Chun turned off her display and gave Kelthar that direct eye contact humans favored. "Because when I was a girl, I learned about something called the Holocaust. It happened on Earth about 500 years ago. Millions of people were murdered while the world watched and did nothing. After it was over, everyone asked how it could have happened. The answer was simple. Good people did nothing while evil people acted." "I don't understand," Kelthar admitted. "We learned that neutrality in the face of aggression is its own kind of sin. If we have the power to help and choose not to, we're responsible for what follows." 3 weeks later, the Kralathi attacked a human mining colony on the border. The colony was in disputed territory that humans had settled legally under council guidelines. 5,000 human civilians were killed in the initial bombardment. Kelthar was in the council chamber when the news arrived. He watched Admiral Zhao receive the message, watched the man's face go completely still. The admiral stood slowly and walked to the center of the chamber. "The colony on Proxima Reach has been destroyed by Kralathi forces," Zhao said. His voice was quiet, but every being in the chamber heard it clearly. 5,000 United Earth Federation citizens are dead. This was not an accident. This was not a border skirmish. This was an act of war. Admiral, please, Speaker Vordum began. We must pursue diplomatic. The time for diplomacy ended when they killed our civilians, Zhao interrupted. High Commander Draxler wanted to test us. He wanted to see if we would respond like the rest of you, with words and committees and strongly worded protests. We won't. What will you do? Kelther found himself asking. Zhao looked directly at him. We're going to show the Kralathi what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. The human response was terrifyingly swift. Within 8 hours, a full human battle group arrived at the Kralathi border fortress that had launched the attack. Kelther watched the engagement through the Council's monitoring systems. Unable to look away, the Kralathi fortress was massive, a military station that had stood for 500 years. It had enough firepower to destroy a small fleet. The humans had brought exactly that, a small fleet. 3 cruisers, 6 destroyers, and a carrier vessel. The battle should have been impossible for the humans to win. The Kralathi had superior numbers and defensive advantages. But Kelther watched as the humans did something he had never seen in warfare. They adapted in real time. When the fortress's long-range batteries proved too powerful, the human ships didn't retreat. They split into groups, using the debris field of old satellites as cover, approaching from multiple angles. When the Kralathi deployed fighter craft, the human carrier launched smaller ships that moved in coordinated patterns, each one covering the other's weaknesses. The humans used missiles that could change targets mid-flight. They used electronic warfare to confuse Kralathi sensors. When one of their destroyers was badly damaged, the other ships moved to shield it while it retreated, maintaining covering fire the entire time. Kelther realized he was watching something he had only read about in ancient texts: combined arms warfare. The coordination of different weapon systems, different ship types, different strategies, all working toward a single goal. His people had abandoned such tactics 40,000 years ago. As unnecessarily complex and violent, the humans had perfected them. The battle lasted 4 hours. The Kralathi fortress was reduced to debris. The human fleet had lost 1 destroyer and suffered damage to 2 cruisers, but they had achieved complete victory. High Commander Draxler appeared on all council channels, his face twisted with rage. You have no idea what you've started, humans. We have destroyed civilizations. We have conquered worlds. You are children playing with weapons you don't understand. Admiral Zhao's response was broadcast just as widely. Commander, we've been playing with weapons since we discovered that rocks could crack skulls. We've had 10,000 years to get good at it. You're about to learn the difference between conquering peaceful species and fighting one that remembers war. Kelther filed an emergency request with the Council. He needed to study this more closely. He needed to understand what humanity actually was. Because something had become terribly clear. Everyone had been wrong about these newcomers. The Council granted his request. Kelther would embed with human forces as an official observer. He would document their warfare just as he had documented their culture. As he prepared to join the human fleet, Dalmor came to his quarters. You're making a mistake, his colleague said. The humans are violent, dangerous, you could be killed. Kelther's antenna twitched thoughtfully. The humans are something, certainly, but I don't think violent is the right word. There's purpose in what they do, control. They're not raging animals. There's something much more frightening. What's that? Professionals, Kelther said quietly. They're professional soldiers, and I think we're about to learn what that really means. The human warship Indomitable was nothing like what Kelther expected. He had imagined a sterile military vessel, all hard surfaces and aggressive angles. Instead, he found organized chaos barely contained by discipline. The corridors hummed with activity. Crew members moved with purpose, calling out updates and confirmations. Screens displayed tactical data, ship status, and star maps. The air smelled strange, cleaned but lived in, with undertones of something the humans called coffee. They drank it constantly, a dark, bitter liquid that seemed to keep them alert. Captain Sarah Okonkwo met Kelther in the observation deck. She was tall for a human, with dark skin and hair tied back in a practical style. Her uniform was neat but showed signs of wear. Real wear, not ceremonial aging. "Welcome aboard, Kelther," she said, offering her hand for that strange greeting gesture. "I understand you're here to document how we fight." "I am here to understand," Kelther corrected gently. "The Council needs to know what humanity brings to this conflict." Okonkwo smiled, but it was the sad human smile he had learned to recognize. "What we bring is 10,000 years of practice in killing each other. The Kralathi are about to learn that lesson the hard way." Over the following weeks, Kelther embedded himself in every aspect of the Indomitable's operations. He attended tactical briefings. He watched training exercises. He interviewed crew members from every department. And slowly, terrifyingly, he began to understand. The first shocking realization came during a routine tactical meeting. The humans were planning an assault on a Kralathi supply depot. Commander Hayes, the tactical officer, laid out the approach on a holographic display. "We'll hit them at 0300 local time," Hayes explained. "Intelligence suggests they rotate guards at 0-2-30. We'll have a 30-minute window of confusion. Alpha team goes in hard and fast, draws their attention to the north quadrant. Bravo team circles around and hits the command center from the south. Charlie team secures the supplies. We estimate 14 minutes from insertion to extraction." "Estimated casualties?" Captain Okonkwo asked. "We might lose 3, maybe 4 people. Acceptable for the strategic gain." Kelther's translator struggled with that phrase. "Acceptable losses." He interrupted the meeting. "Excuse me, but did you say acceptable losses? You expect your own people to die?" Hayes looked at him with patient eyes. "In war, people die, Kelther. Our job is to minimize those deaths while achieving our objectives. We never want to lose anyone. But if we don't accept that risk, we can't fight effectively. The Kralathi understand this." "So do we, but they are your people?" "Your crew, yes," Okonkwo said quietly. "And that's why we plan carefully. Why we train constantly. Why we use every advantage we can find. But at the end of the day, war has a cost. We pay it so that civilians don't have to." The operation went exactly as planned. Kelther watched from the Indomitable as the assault teams executed their mission with frightening precision. The Kralathi never knew what hit them. The humans lost 2 soldiers, not the estimated 4. When the teams returned, Kelther expected celebration. Instead, he found quiet grief. The crew gathered in what they called the chapel, a small room with no specific religious symbols. Captain Okonkwo spoke about the 2 who died, Lieutenant Chun and Corporal Washington. She told stories about them. Their bravery, their humor, their families back home. Then the crew observed a minute of silence before returning to their duties. "They died achieving the mission," Kelther said to Hayes afterward. "Should you not celebrate this success?" Hayes looked at him with something close to anger. "We never celebrate death, Kelther. Chun and Washington were heroes. They knew the risks and accepted them. But their deaths are tragedies, not victories. We remember them. We honor them. And we make sure their sacrifice mattered." The second realization came when Kelther discovered the human library of military history. It was enormous. Thousands of texts, millions of battle analyses, countless studies of warfare spanning their entire recorded history. A young officer named Lieutenant Park found him reading one night. The book was about something called World War II, a conflict that had killed more than 60 million humans. "That's required reading at the academy," Park said, settling into a chair nearby. "We study the old wars to avoid repeating mistakes." "You killed 60 million of your own species in this war?" Kelther asked, his antenna trembling. "More if you count the indirect deaths. Famine, disease, displaced populations." Park said it calmly, but Kelther could hear the weight in her voice. "We did horrible things in that war. Both sides. It taught us what happens when you let ideology override humanity. Yet you study it? Learn from it? Of course. If we forget the lessons, we're doomed to repeat them." Park leaned forward. Every human officer has to study military history. We learn about ancient battles fought with swords and shields. We learn about the wars fought with gunpowder and cannons. The nuclear age. The cyber conflicts. All of it. We learn what worked, what failed, and why. The Kralathi conquered 40 worlds, Kelther said. They have experience with war? Park shook her head. They have experience with conquest. That's different. They fought species that didn't know how to resist. They won through superior force against opponents who barely fought back. They've never faced an enemy that fights smart. The third realization came during the Battle of the Terminus Gate. The Kralathi had set a trap. They had positioned 5 battle groups at a critical supply route, knowing the humans would have to challenge them or lose their logistics chain. The humans were outnumbered 5-1. Every tactical analysis said they should retreat and try to find another route. Instead, Captain Okonkwo smiled when she saw the intelligence report. They think they have us, she said at the briefing. They've never heard of a fighting retreat. What is a fighting retreat? Kelther asked. It's when you make your enemy think you're losing while actually setting up your win, Commander Hayes explained. We're going to fall back slowly, making them think they're winning. We'll leave sensor buys that look like damaged ships. We'll transmit false distress signals. We'll make them chase us. And when they're overextended and out of formation, we spring the trap. But this is deception, Kelther protested. It's not honorable combat. Okonkwo turned to him with that direct human stare. Kelther, there's nothing honorable about combat. War isn't a duel between knights. It's survival. And in survival, the smart win and the proud die. We choose to be smart. And the battle lasted 18 hours. The humans retreated exactly as planned, leaving a trail of sensor decoys and false signatures. The Kralathi pursued eagerly, their formations spreading out as different groups moved at different speeds to catch what they thought were crippled human ships. When the Kralathi were fully extended, the human fleet turned and attacked. But they didn't attack the whole Kralathi force. They focused on one battle group, overwhelming it completely while the others were too far away to help. Then they shifted to the next group, then the next. It was called defeat in detail, Lieutenant Park explained to Kelther. Attack your enemy piece by piece, never letting them bring their full strength against you. The Kralathi lost 3 entire battle groups before they realized what was happening and retreated. The humans had lost only a handful of ships that night. Kelther found Admiral Zhao in the command center, reviewing the battle data. The admiral looked tired, older somehow. Your people fight in ways that seem... Kelther struggled for the word. Wrong, deceptive, calculating? Yao nodded slowly. We don't fight fair, if that's what you mean. Fair fights are for sports, not survival. When the Kralathi attacked our colony, they killed 5,000 civilians. They thought we'd respond like the council with protests and negotiations. Instead, we responded like humans with everything we have. But your tactics, your strategies, they seem designed to win, Zhao finished. Yes, that's exactly what they're designed to do. Kelther, let me tell you something about humanity. We spent 10,000 years fighting each other. We developed weapons that could end our species. We created killing machines that would horrify your people. We studied war like you study art, and do you know what we learned? What? That war is a science. It has rules, principles, patterns. Attack from the high ground. Maintain supply lines. Know your enemy. Adapt faster than they can respond. We didn't invent these ideas. Ancient human generals discovered them thousands of years ago. We've just been refining them ever since. The Kralathi have experience with war, Kelther said, repeating what he'd told Lieutenant Park. Zhao shook his head. The Kralathi have experience with winning. That's different. They've never lost. They've never had to adapt. They've never faced an enemy that could match them tactically and exceed them strategically. They're like a champion boxer who's only fought children. Technically skilled, but untested against a real opponent? And humanity is a real opponent? Zhao's expression turned grim. We're the most dangerous opponent they could possibly face. Because we're not just good at war, Kelthor. We're excellent at it. We've had thousands of years and millions of deaths to teach us. Every tactic the Kralothi can imagine, we've already used. Every strategy they might try, we've already countered. Every psychological game they could play, we invented. The war had been going for 6 months when Kelthor began to understand the true nature of human warfare. It wasn't just their tactics or their training. It was something deeper, something that made them fundamentally different from every other species he had studied. The realization started in the medical bay of the Indomitable. Kelthor had gone there to document human medical practices for his report. What he found instead was a scene that would have been impossible in any other military he knew. A human soldier, Corporal Martinez, had been badly injured in a skirmish. He had lost his right leg below the knee and sustained significant internal injuries. By any logical calculation, he was a liability. Resources spent keeping him alive could be used elsewhere, but the medical team worked with desperate intensity to save him. Dr. Amari, the chief medical officer, had been operating for 6 hours straight. Her hands moved with precision, repairing damage, stabilizing organs, fighting for every fraction of life. Why? Kelthor asked a nurse who was monitoring vitals. He cannot fight anymore. The logical choice is to let him pass comfortably and conserve resources. The nurse, a young woman named Stevens, looked at him with barely controlled anger. Because he's one of us. We don't abandon our people. Ever. But the efficiency, damn efficiency, Stevens snapped, then took a breath to control herself. Sorry, Kelthor. I know you don't understand. But in human military doctrine, we have a code. Leave no one behind. Martinez is getting home. He's going to see his kids again. That's not negotiable. Dr. Amari emerged from surgery 12 hours after she began. She was exhausted, swaying on her feet, but she was smiling. He'll make it. He'll need months of rehab and a prosthetic leg, but he'll live. The medical team cheered. These same people who planned acceptable losses and calculated casualty rates were celebrating saving one soldier who would never fight again. Captain Okonkwo visited Martinez when he woke. Kelthor observed from a respectful distance. How you feeling, Corporal? Okonkwo asked, pulling up a chair beside the bed. Like I lost a fight with a Kralothi tank, ma'am, Martinez said weakly. But alive. Doc Amari says I'll walk again. Maybe not run marathons, but walk. You did good work out there. You held that position when anyone else would have retreated. You gave your squad time to evacuate the civilians. Okonkwo paused. You're getting a commendation. And when you're healed, you've got a choice. Medical retirement with full honors or a transfer to tactical operations? We can always use good people in planning. You'd let me keep serving? Martinez's eyes widened. Even like this? You've got a brain, 2 hands, and a warrior's heart. That's more valuable than 2 working legs. Okonkwo smiled. You're still useful, Corporal. If you want to be. After Okonkwo left, Kelthor approached Martinez's bed. I don't understand your people, he admitted. The resources spent saving you could have been used for weapons, supplies, strategic advantages. Martinez looked at him for a long moment. You want to know what makes us dangerous, Kelthor? It's not our weapons. It's not our tactics. It's that every single human in this fleet knows that if they fall, we'll move heaven and hell to bring them home. That makes people brave. That makes them willing to take risks they wouldn't take otherwise. Because they know they matter. Every one of us matters. The second revelation came during the human logistics review. Kelthor had assumed, like most council species, that logistics was a simple matter of moving supplies from point A to point B, but he discovered that humanity had turned supply chain management into an art form as sophisticated as their combat. Tactics. Commander Williams, the logistics officer, showed him the planning boards. We can project supply needs 6 months in advance, she explained. Food, ammunition, medical supplies, replacement parts, fuel. We know exactly what each ship needs, when they need it, and how to get it to them. We have redundant supply lines, hidden caches, and emergency protocols. This seems excessive, Kelther observed. An army marches on its stomach, Williams quoted. That's ancient human wisdom. You can have the best soldiers and the best weapons, but if you can't feed them and resupply them, you lose. The Kralathi have better individual ships than us, but we can keep our ships supplied and operational longer. That's how you win wars. The Kralathi were learning this lesson the hard way. Their supply lines stretched across their conquered territories, long and vulnerable. Human raiders hit these lines constantly, disrupting shipments, destroying depots, making the Kralathi war effort increasingly difficult, but it was the siege of Krola Prime that truly showed Kelther what humanity was. Krola Prime was the Kralathi homeworld, the seat of their empire. After 8 months of war, human forces had pushed deep into Kralathi space. Now they stood at the gates of the enemy's home. The tactical situation was clear. The humans could win. Kelther attended the final strategic meeting before the assault. He expected to hear plans for orbital bombardment, for overwhelming force, for the kind of total war that the Kralathi themselves had waged on other worlds. Instead, Admiral Zhao began the meeting with a simple statement. Our objective is to end this war, not to commit genocide. Sir, one of the younger officers protested. The Kralathi have killed thousands of our civilians. They've shown no mercy. Why should we? Gao's expression hardened. Because we're not them. Because we're better than that. And because if we become monsters to fight monsters, we lose something we can never get back. The plan that emerged was audacious and difficult. Instead of orbital bombardment, they would conduct a precision ground assault. Special forces teams would infiltrate the city, disable military targets, and secure strategic positions. The goal was to capture the Kralathi leadership, not to destroy the civilian population. This will cost us more casualties, Hayes pointed out. A ground assault is much riskier than bombardment. I know, Zhao said quietly. But those are our people dying to save Kralathi civilians. That's a price I'm willing to pay, because that's who we are. Kelther watched the assault unfold with a mixture of horror and awe. Human soldiers dropped into the most defended city in the Kralathi Empire. They fought building to building, room to room, taking enormous risks to avoid civilian casualties. When they encountered Kralathi civilians, they moved them to safety. When they found wounded enemy soldiers, they treated them. The Kralathi defenders fought with desperate fury. They had expected destruction from orbit, had prepared for martyrdom. Instead, they faced an enemy that seemed to value Kralathi. Civilian lives as much as their own. Lieutenant Park led one of the assault teams. Kelther watched her helmet camera feed as her squad cleared a government building. They encountered a group of Kralathi civilians huddled in a basement. Children, elderly, non-combatants. Clear them to Safe Zone Beta, Park ordered. Get them water and medical attention if needed. Why? One of her soldiers asked. They're enemy civilians. They're civilians, Park corrected. That's all that matters. The battle for Krola Prime lasted 4 days. The humans lost 200 soldiers. They could have lost none by simply bombarding from orbit. But they chose the harder path. When High Commander Draxler was finally cornered in his command center, it was Captain Okonkwo who accepted his surrender. Kelther was there, documenting everything. Draxler stood tall despite his defeat, his scales showing battle damage. You should have destroyed us from orbit, he said. You could have ended this without losing a single soldier. We could have, Okonkwo agreed. But then we'd be no better than you. We came here to stop a war, not to commit atrocities. You are strange creatures, Draxler said, something like respect in his voice. We have conquered 40 worlds. None fought like you. But more than that, none showed mercy like you. We thought mercy was weakness. Mercy is a choice, Okonkwo replied. And choosing mercy when you have the power to destroy takes more strength than you can imagine. That night, Kelther sat with Admiral Zhao on the Indomitable's observation deck, watching Krola Prime below. The city was intact. Lights were coming back on as power was restored. Human medical teams were treating Krulathi wounded. Human engineers were repairing damaged infrastructure. Your people confuse me, Kelthar admitted. You are the most effective warriors I have ever witnessed. You could have destroyed the Krulathi completely. Yet you saved them instead. Zhao was quiet for a moment. Do you know why we're so good at war, Kelthar? It's because we know what it costs. We've destroyed our own cities. We've killed our own people. We've looked into the abyss of total war and seen what it makes us. That's why we fight with rules. That's why we value every life, even enemy lives. The other council species believe war should be clean, distant, civilized, Kelthar said. But you embrace its brutality while still maintaining your principles? War is never clean, Zhao replied. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. But you can fight brutally and still fight justly. You can be lethal and still be moral. That's the paradox of human warfare. We're the most dangerous because we're the most disciplined. The council owes you a debt it can never repay, Kelthar said. Zhao shook his head. We didn't do this for debt or gratitude. We did it because it was right. Because when you have power, you have responsibility. Because 200 years ago, we almost destroyed ourselves. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Every seat was filled. Representatives from 200 species waited to hear Kelthar's report on humanity's role in ending the Krulathi conflict. The war had concluded 3 months ago, but the galaxy was still processing what it meant. Kelthar stood at the center of the chamber, his data tablet containing a year's worth of observations, interviews, and battle analyses. His antenna twitched nervously. What he was about to say would change the galaxy's understanding of humanity forever. Honored council members, he began, his voice amplified through translation systems. I have spent the past year embedded with human military forces. I witnessed their tactics, their culture, their way of war. You asked me to determine what threat level humanity represents to galactic peace and stability. He paused, letting the tension build. My conclusion is this: humanity is the most dangerous military force the galaxy has ever seen. Not in spite of their moral principles, but because of them. The chamber erupted in confused chittering, warbling, and clicking. Speaker Vertam called for order. Please explain, the speaker said. Kel single quotes Tar activated his holographic display. Images appeared: battle footage, tactical diagrams, casualty reports. The Krulathi Empire conquered 40 worlds over 3,000 years. They were considered the galaxy's premier military power. Humanity defeated them completely in less than 1 year. This alone should tell you something. But the how is more important than the what. He showed footage of the Battle of Terminus Gate. Humans fight with coordination and complexity that we abandoned as barbaric millennia ago. They call it combined arms warfare. Every weapon system, every ship type, every soldier works together as one organism. Their tactics adapt in real time. They plan for contingencies we cannot imagine. They study warfare like we study philosophy. But this is simple military superiority, commented Ambassador Treshka of the Zenthari. Surely this makes them powerful but not uniquely dangerous? You misunderstand? Kelthar replied. Their military superiority is merely a symptom. The true danger lies in what created it. He changed the display to show human history files. Humanity has been at war with itself for its entire recorded history. 10,000 years of continuous conflict. They fought with stones, then bronze, then iron, then gunpowder, then nuclear weapons. They developed the ability to exterminate their own species. He let that sink in before continuing. And having developed that ability, they chose not to use it. They developed something they call mutually assured destruction, doctrine where using their ultimate weapons would guarantee their own annihilation. So they learned restraint at the brink of extinction. The chamber was silent now, everyone listening intently. Let me show you something specific, Kelthar said. He displayed footage from human history archives, black and white images of destroyed cities, mushroom clouds, memorials carved with millions of names. This is from their Second World War. Over 60 million humans died. This is from their Cold War, where two nations pointed enough nuclear weapons at each other to make their planet uninhabitable. This is from their climate wars, where resource scarcity nearly destroyed their civilization. He turned to face the council directly. Every human alive today is descended from survivors of atrocities we cannot imagine. Every human carries genetic memory of their species hovering on the edge of self-annihilation. And they remember. Oh, by all the stars, they remember. Dalmor Calthar's colleague spoke up. But surely this history of violence makes them dangerous in the traditional sense. Unstable? Aggressive? You still don't understand, Calthar said, frustration creeping into his voice. I've visited Earth as part of my research. I walked through their museums of war. Every major city has them. Museums dedicated to remembering their conflicts. They don't hide their violent history, they display it prominently. They teach it to their children. They study it in their academies. He showed images from the museums, uniforms behind glass, weapons mounted on walls, eternal flames burning in memorial parks. They have a saying, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. Humans don't forget. They can't afford to, because they know exactly what they're capable of. I observed something remarkable during the siege of Krola Prime, Calthar continued, showing footage of human soldiers treating wounded Kralathi civilians. Humans could have destroyed the Kralathi homeworld from orbit. They could have ended the war with 0 casualties. Instead, they conducted a ground assault that cost 200 human lives. They did this to avoid killing enemy civilians. This is mercy, Speaker Vertam observed. This is good, surely? It's more than mercy, Calthar corrected. It's disciplined force. It's the choice to follow rules of engagement even when those rules make victory harder. It's the decision to value enemy lives while simultaneously being willing to die for the mission. This is what makes them truly dangerous. He switched to displaying human military doctrine files. Humans have something they call the laws of armed conflict. Rules they impose on themselves about how war should be fought. They debate the ethics of every weapon, every tactic, every strategy. They court-martial their own soldiers for violating these rules. They hold themselves accountable even in the midst of combat. Ambassador Drexian, a Mrath philosopher, spoke thoughtfully. So they fight with one hand tied behind their backs, so to speak. Worse, Calthar said. They fight with both hands tied, one leg hobbled, and weights attached to their bodies. And they still win. Because their self-imposed limitations make them sharper, smarter, more creative. When you can't solve a problem with overwhelming force, you must solve it with overwhelming intelligence. He displayed combat footage showing human tactical decisions. Watch how they fight. Every casualty is mourned. Every soldier matters. They have a code, leave no one behind. This means they take enormous risks to recover wounded soldiers who can no longer contribute to the fight. Logically, this is inefficient. Emotionally, it makes them unstoppable. I don't follow, Treshka admitted. Because every human soldier knows their life has value to their command structure, they fight harder. They take risks they wouldn't take otherwise. They hold positions they should abandon. They charge into danger they should avoid. Because they know that if they fall, heaven and hell will be moved to bring them home. This creates a fighting force that will not break, cannot be intimidated, and refuses to surrender. Kelthar's voice grew softer. I spoke with Admiral Yao about this. He told me that 200 years ago, humanity nearly destroyed itself with nuclear weapons. They came within minutes of extinction. And in that moment, they made a choice. They chose survival. They chose cooperation. They chose peace. But they kept their weapons, he continued. They kept their military traditions. They kept their warrior culture. Because they learned that peace isn't the absence of the ability to wage war. It's the choice not to wage war when you have that ability. This is what makes them terrifying. He displayed images of the human fleet now patrolling council space. The Kralathi conquered through force and intimidation. They destroyed those who resisted and enslaved those who surrendered. Humanity defeated them completely, occupied their homeworld, and then helped them rebuild. They turned their enemy into an ally. That's not just victory, that's transformation. High Commander Draxler himself requested that I include his statement in this report, Kelther said, playing a recording. Draxler's massive form appeared, scales gleaming. I have fought on 40 worlds, the Kralathi commander said. I have conquered civilizations and crushed resistance. I thought I understood war. The humans taught me I understood nothing. They didn't just defeat us militarily, they defeated us philosophically. They showed us that true strength isn't the ability to destroy, but the discipline not to destroy when you have that ability. The Kralathi Empire joins the Council not as conquered subjects, but as humbled students. We have much to learn from these humans. The recording ended. Kelther continued his presentation. The question before the Council is, what do we do with humanity? They have proven themselves in combat. They have saved Council worlds. They have defeated our greatest threat. But make no mistake, they are themselves a threat of unprecedented magnitude. You recommend restrictions? Speaker Vertam asked carefully. I recommend the opposite, Kelther said firmly. I recommend we offer humanity permanent council membership with full voting rights. More than that, I recommend we offer them command authority over all council defensive forces. The chamber exploded in protest. Kelther waited for silence before continuing. We are weak, he said bluntly. All of us. We have lived in peace for so long that we have forgotten how to defend ourselves. We thought peace was permanent, that civilization had evolved beyond conflict. We were wrong. The Kralathi proved that. And more threats will come, pirates, rogues, perhaps other aggressive species. We need someone who remembers how to fight. But giving humans such power, Dalmor began. Is the smartest decision we could make? Kelther interrupted his colleague. Because humans don't want power. They want peace. But unlike us, they understand that peace must be defended. They have the weapons, the training, the doctrine, and most importantly, the discipline to be the galaxy's guardians.